Esther. And I'll go furthermore in details. Lord, let these words be known to us and let it be in our hearts. So this is a heroine of a book that was named after Esther. Yeah? Esther, as you know, was a young Jewish woman living in exile in the Persian diaspora, who through her youth and beauty becomes the queen of the Persian Empire. And then by her wits and courage saves the Jewish people from destruction. Now, as you know, in the video clip, it says that it was around 470 BC. So in the book of Esther, though, it occurred between 483 BC to 473 BC. During the first half of reign of King Ahasuerus, brackets Xerxes I. During this time period, the first remnant of the Jews who had returned to Judah were struggling to reestablish the temple worship according to the law of Moses. But Esther and Mordecai, along with many other Jews, they chose not to make that trek back to Jerusalem. They stayed, back to Judah, sorry. They stayed behind, and they stayed in Susa, which is the capital city of Persia, and this is where the story is set. Now, who wrote the book of Esther? People thought it is Esther. Well, the author is unknown, okay? The scholars these days still is unknown to them. But they are likely a Jew that was very familiar with the royal Persian court. The detailed description of the court life and the traditions, as well as the events that occurred in the book, point to an eyewitness author. So this person must have been an eyewitness at that time, okay? So because his perspective was pro-Jewish, scholars believe he was a Jew writing for the remnant that had returned to Judah under the Zerubbabel. Some have suggested Mordecai himself was the author, though the accolades for him found in the text suggests that it's another person. Perhaps one of his younger contemporaries was the author. Now the book is named for the star of the story, a young Jewish girl named Hadassah. So Esther, her real name is Hadassah, which is her Jewish name. And as you know, she was taken from her guardian Mordecai and forced to compete for the affection of the king. This unlikely contestant for a beauty pageant was crowned queen of Persia and renamed Esther, meaning star in Persian language. Oh yeah, Persian. So the story of Esther, as you can see, it was during the time of Xerxes I reign. The book, it explains how the Feast of Purim came to be, celebrated by the Jews. Esther, the beautiful Jewish wife of the Persian king, Xerxes I, and her cousin Mordecai, persuaded the king to retract an order for the general annihilation of Jews throughout the empire. The massacre had been plotted by the king's chief minister, Haman, and the date decided by casting lots, which is Purim. Instead, Haman was hanged on the gallows he built for Mordecai, and on the day planned for the annihilation, the Jews destroyed their enemies. According to the book of Esther, the Feast of Purim was established to celebrate that day, but this explanation is surely a legendary one. There is nothing close to a consensus, however, as to what the historical event provided the basis for the story. The book may have been composed as late as the first half of the 2nd century BC. To the origin of the Purim festival could date to the Babylonian exile, which is the 6th century BC. Okay. So in the Bible, it says here, in Esther 9, verses 31 to 32. It says here, to confirm these days of Purim in their times appointed, according as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had enjoined them, and as they had decreed for themselves and for their seed, the masters of the fasting and their cry. The decree of Esther confirmed these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. So, who is Esther? So Esther first appears in the story of a young virgin collected in the king's harem as possible replacement for Vashti, which was the first wife. And she was banished because of King Xerxes. She denied him her presence. Now, Esther, her parents died. Her cousin, which is Mordecai, adopted her. And actually, Mordecai is from the tribe of Benjamin. So not much is revealed about her character, but she is described as beautiful, she is obedient, and she appears to be pliant and cooperative. That's all you hear about her, nothing else. Now, what was she doing in Persia in the first place? As you already know, that she was actually born at the time when Israel was in captive in Persia. So she was born in Persia. So she didn't come along when they were exiled. She was born in Persia, okay? And again, her parents were killed. Mordecai adopted her. Now, she was part of a minority, which is considered to be the low spectrum in the society. But later she was chosen to be queen. And however, Mordecai asked her to keep her Jewish nationality a secret. Now, it's interesting why Mordecai would do that. But at the same time, in that certain time, being in a foreign country, not believing in the Lord, not practicing the Jewish traditions and the Jewish law, you wouldn't want to reveal your identity. So to them at that time, and they were used to it, not to reveal their identity as a Jew because of complications or things that can happen to them. Okay, so Esther was quickly, she wins the favor of the chief eunuch, Hagar, and when her turn comes to spend the night with the king, Xerxes I, he falls in love with her and then makes her queen. All this takes place while Esther keeps her Jewish identity a secret. So what happens after she became the queen? So when she first learns of Haman's plot and the threat to the Jews, her reaction is one of helplessness. She knows she cannot approach the king without being summoned, on pain of death, and the king has not summoned her in 30 days, implying that she has fallen out of favor. And that's in Esther 4:11. So even though she is queen, like nowadays, it's not so much, but back then, imagine you're a queen. You still have to wait to be called or summoned by the king. You can't just simply walk out and go, my love, I need this, or, you know what I mean? There is still order at that time. Okay? Now, however, following Mordecai's insistent prodding, she resolves to do what she can do to save her people, ending with the ringing declaration. And she says this: after that, I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. And that's in Esther 4:16. Now, again, her character, she's very pliant and obedient. Esther has become a woman of action. So it didn't matter now if it's her life in the line, she's thinking of her nation, her people. Okay? She appears unsummoned before King Xerxes, who not only does not heal her, thank God, because of praying and fasting, but promises to grant her request. Now, I'm not sure if you notice this and if you've read the book of Esther. Throughout the whole book, God is not mentioned. Have you noticed that? Not once, never even in his name he's mentioned. Okay? But his providence is clearly in the background. Correct? So, in a superb moment of understatement, Esther asked the king to a dinner party. That's in Esther 5:4. The king accompanied Haman, attends Esther's banquet, and again seeks to discover her request, which she once more deflects with an invitation, as she saw, another dinner party. Only at the second dinner party is when the king is sufficiently marginalized members of the when the king is sufficiently beguiled by her charms, does she reveal her true purpose. So by unmasking of Haman and his plot, she reveals to him that her identity as a Jew, and she accuses Haman of his plot, okay? His plan to destroy her and her people. So the volatile king springs to the defense of his woman, his queen, to whom he was indifferent 3 days earlier. So he was indifferent with her prior. Okay? Haman is executed, and the Jews receive permission to defend themselves from their enemies, which they do with great success. So that's in Esther 7-9. The book ends with Mordecai elevated to the office of Grand Vizier, and power now concentrated in the hands of Esther. Okay? So conclusion. So this is all the background, the conclusion. So Esther and her book have suffered much at the hands of interpreters throughout the history of centuries. Now, although very popular among the Jewish people, it is one of the last books to be accepted into the canon, and was accepted only because of its connection with the festival of Purim. So technically, they would not have accepted this because she was a woman. That book was not accepted. The only reason why they accepted it is the connection to Purim. Okay? The book has been taken to task for irreligiosity. God is not mentioned. And the only Jewish religious practice was referring to the fasting. So that's the only thing that you hear or you see. Nothing to do with God, nothing to do with what they were practicing. You don't mention of them going into temple, them going into prayer, nothing like that. Or doing they call this they do on the Sabbath day, nothing like that. So it's troubling by Esther's failure to live as a Jew. Because like I said, you don't hear anything. But scholars say that her as a Jew, she didn't live up to it. Which is interesting, because the book of Esther doesn't say much about her. Only says the things that she actually did. But in their argument's sake, the scholars are saying that because she has failed as a Jew, because she did not practice, they have targeted her in this way, that she has a sexual intercourse with and marries a Gentile, which is Xerxes, the king, lives with the Persian court, and she does not follow the Jewish dietary laws. In addition, Esther has been taken to task by both female and male commentators for apparent willingness to participate in Persian harem customs, and by Christian commentators for her evident bloodthirstiness in destroying Gentiles. So there's a part there in Esther, the book of Esther, chapter 9, 1 to 15, where she actually tells the king to kill certain Jews, or to kill her own people. But there's a reason to it. Okay? She wouldn't have said it if she knew there was a reason. Okay, so you're going to read chapter 9 and from 1 to 15. But the Christian commentators or people are arguing that she's not really a true Jew because of her character. Now, all criticism aside, however, yes, she failed to grasp the true purpose of the book, or we try to fail the purpose of the book. But the purpose of this book, which a lot of people miss, is demonstrating to the Jews living in exile that it is possible to live and observe the traditions in the country of one's exile without giving up one's identity as a Jew. And it is exactly the same for us today. Okay, I'm going to repeat it. So, it is possible to live and observe our traditions as a follower of Jesus Christ in a country we're not exiled, which is a good thing. However, there are things that is indifferent to us, but we do not have to give up our identity. Yeah? So, such a time like this, even to our days now, we can, and it is possible to demonstrate ourselves as a believer and a follower of Jesus Christ in this world, in this nation, who doesn't believe in God, are you willing to boldly stand up for the Lord and stand up for His righteousness? And someone is making a decree against the Christians and pushing their own agendas against us. Are you willing to stand up against them? That's the question. So in Esther 4:13-14, then Mordecai commanded an answer to Esther, "Think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews." So basically saying, just because you are chosen to be in a place where you may have a, what do you call this? When somebody has protection, because you know certain people, or you're connected to certain people. But it says here in 14, it says, "For thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Such a popular verse, such a popular description or sentence. Come to the kingdom for such a time as this. When will it be your time? When it says, someone will say to you, for such a time as this. And as Sister Gwen just said, she was there an hour later, or less than an hour later, for such a time as that. So, we see Esther as a true example of a woman. One, she's a woman, not really regarded as someone important, even though she was titled as a queen. She was still needed to be summoned by the king, but she pushed that. She pushed that boundary. She prayed, she fasted, she asked God for help, even though God was never mentioned in that book. So you can see that in that certain time period, God may not have been mentioned, and it seems like that in our society now. It is such a taboo to even mention the word God. It is such a taboo, and it's sad. But the thing is, are you going to keep quiet? Are you going to continue to just stay back and not do anything? Are you willing to be that Esther and go, no, I am going to stand up for what I believe in, stand up for my people, for God's people, and actually do something. I know, some people say, oh, I'm only one person. Yes, you're only one person. God is not going to ask you to go up there and start, protesting. Yeah, no. There are certain things that God will ask you to do at your own way, at your own time, because little things make a difference, or little things that you can do for His kingdom makes a difference. You don't need to be a full-on mega pastor in a mega church to make a difference. It's us little people that makes that difference. Because as it says here, there are remnants. There's not much left right now of us, true believers, that would really stand up for God's righteousness. They are willing to just follow the crowd, follow what the trend is, and try to compromise and try to change what God's true meaning of the word to try and suit their wants. But how can you try and compromise when God's word is never changing? It will never change for anybody. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you tell people, oh, I'm a good person. No, it does not matter. God will never change His words. It will be forever be the same in the past, present, and in the future. And for us to change the words to suit our wants is not a very good recipe. We will fail, and we would have disappointed God and our fellow brothers and sisters. And it's okay to make mistakes. I'm not saying, don't make mistakes. We make mistakes. That's when you have grace. It's okay. But learn from that mistake and don't ever do it again. As much as possible. Esther is a perfect example. All she did, she knew there was one thing, is to save her people. Now, there will be a point in our lifetime where we may have to stand up. And this is a time where you have to go, okay, am I ready to stand up for the Lord and for His word? But again, that is your choice, that is what God has given you, and if you choose to do that, then He will honor that. There's no condemnation, there's no pressuring. God will honor you, whatever decision you do for His kingdom. But at the same time, just don't sit back and watch. Do something, just something for Him. Have the spirit of Esther. Whatever it is that you see that there's injustice, if there is something that is not right in the eyes of God, make a decision to do something about it, and then let God be in it. Let God partnership with you in that decision that you make, and He will honor that, and He will make sure that whatever you decided to help in His kingdom, it will flow, it will work. So, again, Esther, perfect example. She was a woman. They called her, the theologians said that, she wasn't really a Jew. She didn't follow traditions. Who cares? Who cares? We live in this time now where Christ, full of grace. We would never be able to complete the 10 Commandments anyway on our own. So, who cares? Doesn't matter what your background is. Just step up, do something, bring someone to Christ, help someone in need. If you believe something's not right, just do something. And we're doing that part for God's kingdom. So, again, I pray that you take something away today from the book of Esther. Esther, people say it's not true, but Xerxes is a real king of the ancient Persia. How could it not, Esther be not real? I don't get it. But if you look in history, there is a woman that was named after Esther. The thing is that the Esther that is in the Bible? Right? And they've actually, the people actually made her like a goddess. But again, that's the people of Persia. But if that is the Esther that is in the Bible, then that could be her. If you put all the evidence, put them together. But her legacy lives on. And we've got an example and something that we can try to, be like. And to not just be like, but also do the best that we can, just like as her. If God can use Esther, then He can use us in that time. So, to God be the glory. And I pray that you guys have learned something.